All right, JD here, and today we're going to do something a little different. So it is the 2022 season with regard to Summa by Dr. Ryan. We've had some time to reflect on some of our best clients, and this is based off a conversation I had with one of our clients, incredibly successful individual, super humble, and no one really knows who he is. He operates a specialty pharmacy company in the Midwest, and I say this to illustrate a point. One key takeaway I learned from him as we've kind of worked with him throughout this journey is he mentioned it's just as hard to build a billion-dollar business as it is $100 million business, and you might as well aim as ambitiously as possible. And so he's part of this organization called YPO. One of his peers recently got a lot of notoriety in the franchising space, and so today we're going to do a little bit of a tangent and doing a deep dive into this individual. So this individual, Greg Flynn, we like to call him, as we learned about it, is the, longevity king in franchising. Just sharing some points here. He is a 28-year overnight success story. And especially in this day and age, graduating from Stanford Business School, what's interesting is he didn't go into a technology company or a startup. In fact, he went into IRL in real life, a business in real life. And he started with restaurants. And so getting to 8 and getting to the largest was phenomenal, right? And in terms of his journey. And so the journey starts with him failing with a company at a young age, okay, and struggling because there were inefficiencies of scale, right? The exact opposite of economies of scale, right? And so he had some issues with capital. He had some issues with selling customers, okay, so the marketing notoriety, and also the vendors, right? And so over time, he failed his way to finding a model, right, Applebee's, that was, in his words, 2 or 3 times the size of the existing incumbents, TGI Fridays and Chili's at the time. And so when he got into it, he started it, kind of mastered the 8 locations. He scaled on it to Applebee's. Notice that he didn't go into other locations just yet until he mastered the Applebee's model. And then he kind of diverted and extended out to other types of franchise models. And so what's really interesting is there's a few key pieces here. Yes, he's a success story. Yes, he's phenomenal. But what is interesting is kind of hearing him, talk about the journey. And the journey is really interesting in the sense that it showcases kind of his strategy. And this is a talk from, a few years ago, and you can kind of notice
Okay, right? I mean, I care about the difference. So we bought those first 8, we grew
the
volume
principles he had.
significantly over the years and started building units. And then I started buying other markets in much the same way. So now we're in Ohio, Indiana, New Jersey, and Delaware in addition.
Now, how involved are you with the management, or how is your management structured for that?
I'm the CEO, which is the second most important position in the company. And the COO is the most important. And we're set up with market presidents running day-to-day operations in each market. They roll up to a chief operating officer who is really responsible for a whole variety of things, but one is, sharing best practice as developed between all the different regions around the country and the other franchise, Applebee's markets out there. What I do is, strategy, finance, real estate, senior staffing, and franchisor relations, which are extremely important in this business.
Right. Now, given your real estate business, how much of your mind share does Applebee's consume?
And so if you kind of hear him speak, right, it's really interesting in that he really focuses on what not to do. And what we've noticed in our experience is like what not to do has as much of a driving force in your success in terms of your career, professional, or your business as what to prioritize, right? And so if you heard kind of what he was saying, which he makes kind of the key decisions of real estate and leadership staffing and strategic and kind of finance, the things that actually drive the business, right? And he also had kind of a deep long-term vision, high conviction, right? Stubborn on the vision, flexible in the details, right? And he was able to effectively kind of scale and be a success story, right? And so what's really interesting in this piece is there's super, a large volume of articles talking about his best practices, right? The fact that he used a discipline and pursuit of focus on the bigger picture to kind of to scale, right? He had a slow start again. He had to kind of learn the business from the ground up. He was actually doing some of the GC, general contracting. He was also working in the business, which is great, right? Because everyone wants to kind of have that overnight success story. However, the real truth is it's just a lot of elbow grease and time, right? And focus and prioritization, right? And so what's really interesting is, after he kind of mastered what Applebee's, he kind of scaled up to different operations and different types of businesses, and he kind of continued, and he had kind of the right talent model, and he kind of kept going, right? And so, he has a unique operating system, a unique operating culture that drives the success. Really interesting in the sense of a federal state system, right? A system, an operating system, right? That allows and empowers executives to have decision rights and particular areas of responsibility, AORs, that help them out with driving success, right? And so, he's also a pretty kind of focused on the analytics side as well, along with being kind of consumer facing, right? And, he's never kind of stopping, right? Which is really interesting is the fact that during COVID, he was one of the few kind of operators that was able to step in and buy a kind of a distressed, restaurant group. And the reason why he did it, obviously, he has a smart idea with capital allocation, but he was pretty opportunistic because he had the right team, he had the right operating system, and had the right patience, right? And so there are kind of a number of threads to kind of double click on in terms of his approach, his background, his philosophy, right? And I think from our end, what we've noticed that is he really is really interesting in the fact that he hires and invests in the best teammates, technology, and how you do anything is how you do everything, right? So you notice that he has a Tesla, top line model Tesla, right? And so he really wants to kind of work with the best products as well. And he's willing to kind of make those investments, right? And he's willing to also kind of try new alternatives, new perspectives, right? And so, what the heck does this have to do with longevity, health and wellness, right? Again, it's like how you do anything is how you do everything, right? And, what we've noticed is sometimes clients come to us and they're like, hey, look, I've spent, decades building my business, or decades kind of, with years of elevated cortisol levels or oxidative stress and poor dietary habits and sleep patterns, but I want to see stuff like overnight or in 90 days. And sometimes, it really is trying to take a level set and understand that it takes time to reverse years of damage, right? And years to start kind of building out the right habit patterns of sleep and what to eat, supplements and so forth, kind of setting up the patterns of diagnostic lab testing and so forth. And also, being able to make sure that we are helping you focus on not necessarily your area of competence, but your area of genius. And I say this to illustrate a point, right? One thing that's really interesting about Greg is he is super focused not on his area of competence, but his area of genius. So what is that? The difference between your area of genius is that effectively your area of genius gives you energy, something that you're good at, but you're energized by it, right? And so when you think about kind of most people today, and I'm not saying this applies to you per se, sometimes we just focus on things where we're competent at, but sometimes these tasks are very draining, and you just at the end of it, you're like, what? Gosh, I don't love this, right? But if you notice that when Greg kind of entered the restaurant space, he wasn't going into kind of creating new concepts from the ground up. He tried that, didn't work for him. But instead, he focused on the franchise model, which enabled him to kind of nail down a few variables and then master those variables, right? And when you think about that, right, he really was focusing on his zone of genius, right? He says in that talk at Stanford Business School, hey, look, I'm not the best, manager, not the best leader. And so I need to kind of hire somebody to kind of help me build that out, right? And so if you think about it, when you work with an advisor, if it's on your board or a venture capitalist or somebody that is helping you with your marketing, for example, right? There's an opportunity cost for you doing it yourself. And the same goes with regard to your health, right? If you work with somebody, an advisor, a functional medicine or executive health coach, or a longevity practice like ourselves, with managing kind of your health and wellness, right? That frees you up to focus on things that you can kind of be the master of, right? And so I think really, if you kind of just summarize this, I was super inspired by Greg, not because of, oh yeah, he's this, master of the franchising model, but he was patiently patient. And today, like in 2022, there's this tension between like urgency and execution, and being able to have a patience, right? The patience to build a team, culture, operating framework. It takes time, and having the patience to see results, right, is really important. And so I think in overall kind of perspective, why we're so successful with our clients, we work with a lot of, I would say, top 1% of business owners, founders, and entrepreneurs and executives. And what we notice is that they have this long-term perspective that's not rooted in daily, monthly, quarterly results. Those are important, right? But they're rooted in what they can accomplish in 5 to 10 years. And when we talk about, hey, we want you to live to 100 plus, we want you to ask a question of like, how good can you be, right? Well, that's what we're really focused on. And it's not about, hey, like here's the medications, or here's some therapeutics, or here's some goods, supplements, and gear, so forth that can help you, more so as it is, here's a system, here's some behavioral coaching, here's kind of the analytics, the accountability, the blood testing, and the therapeutics that can kind of help reinforce your day-to-day, right? And so, just to be frank, we can't name names, but we've had a cadre of individuals that have had 9-figure exits on 8-figure type, 7-figure to 8-figure growth models in their top line and so forth. And, it is really inspiring. And I say this to hopefully help you all be inspired by what is possible, but also to pick up some of the tidbits with regard to operators like Greg Flynn, and also to take the long-term perspective. JD here, and talk to you soon.